Okay, well, I'll go ahead, and so if someone sees Chamberlain coming back, will they message him that we went ahead? So let's see, a couple of small adjustments here, and let me share this and do this. So I have spoken to this group before about a project that's, from 2016, I think. I've been trying to make these woven polyhedral shapes. And in April, I got a revise and resubmit request from the Journal of Mathematics and the Arts. And when I was up in the Sierra Nevada over the summer, I had time to work on revising the paper, and I discovered a bunch of new stuff. And I hope that this is how everyone's mathematical artwork goes, is that you try to revise something and make something better, and that opens whole new doors to new inquiries. So the revise resubmit, for people who might not know, I forgot to plan for my slides to be narrow enough to, if you minimize the participants window, you'll be able to see the far edges of my screen. So the paper, for anyone who might not have seen it, is about taking the Sipak Takra, which is a Thai soccer ball, and making a virtual model of it, and then trying to see how you do that with every possible kind of polyhedral symmetry. And it's the thing that I always feel insecure about is defending the proposition that there's enough, that the mathematics is right and that there's enough mathematics. So I was really surprised that both referees sort of seemed to think that there wasn't enough art in the paper. So I thought that was a wonderful invitation to, say more what I thought of the artistic possibilities for this method of making these kind of virtual objects. And they start in the world of digital design space, and then they become two-dimensional images like the one you see here. But then I'll show you at the end, they do become 3D prints as well. So one of the things that was going on with when I submitted the paper, the state of my ability was to use sort of bad meshes in order to make the coloring on this model here. And the thing is that the meshes were really bad. So I was using a photograph to color this area here. But if you look closely, you can see that the surface of this object is broken up into all of these little small triangles. And it's sort of taking one triangle from one part of the photograph and another triangle from another part of the photograph. And it produces a rather unsatisfactory coloring. So I want to tell you about how I went on from that. But first I want to acknowledge this is joint work with my former Santa Clara student, Wilder Boyden. And he was able to give a presentation at our golden section meeting of the MAA back. You'll remember those days when we used to be able to do exotic things like meet with people in person and shake hands and things like that. This was on March 1st of this year. No, February 29th, sorry. So the innovation was to use Grasshopper as a Rhino plugin. This is a screenshot of Grasshopper. You use programming components here, and the formula for the thing that you wish to capture appears here. You can have sliders that influence the parameters and really enable you to do very interesting three-dimensional design work by moving those sliders and then seeing how the shape changes. So that just this much produces great shapes, but in fact the meshes are not that great. It's the human plugin. So yeah, humans are a kind of animal, and the human plugin does things that help you to color meshes, to create a coherent mesh, so that in this case these bands really have the topological type of a torus, and it gives you a nice mesh that really is a rectangle that you can then paste an image on. So here, even though this looks sort of like wood grain, it really is a wallpaper pattern made from wood grain. The photograph of wood is of a piece made by Lauren Larson, who's also a well-known puzzle designer. So this was the thing that I got around to doing this summer, was to make nicer images using cumin and grasshopper and rhino. And for instance, just as one example, here's the 10-band icosahedron with a wallpaper pattern pasted onto it. And it occurs to me I've minimized all images of you, so if you have a question, you're going to have to speak up. Don't be afraid. Go ahead and interrupt me if you wish.
So I weave these differently, Frank. At some point when we're around together, we can talk about it. But so there's a way where you're doing the plating where it's in every other. I think since this doesn't actually exist at all, yours might look better than the version than the properly woven one. It's just in reality you can't always.
Yeah, because I do have one that's 3D printed, but it does not obey a strict over-under weave.
Right,
So I write about this in my paper, that with the formulas that I'm presenting, you're guaranteed to get symmetry. You're not guaranteed to get any kind of weaving. But if you can make an object that does have over-under weaving, then I can prove the theorem that you could make that using my method. I don't necessarily know how to make it using my method, but it can be made that way. So it's like, this is a space of mathematical potentialities that includes everything you could possibly do. So if you see something and, you know, gee, that's not like the one that I like to do, then maybe we could look together, you know, for the one that is more somehow connected to a weaving reality. So yeah, I know that by using the word weaving, it's, you know, I connect with things that others are trying to do.
yeah. And then the other thing is technically it's plating.
Yeah, okay,
you can use the term weaving, but just so you know. And I love your colors though. The pattern you did, like that ribbon, is absolutely gorgeous. And it would look better the way you did it than if you wove it properly. It shows off the material better.
Well, this is many people know the stained glass window that I have, and these colors are from using the photograph of the stained glass window and my wallpaper software. So the thing that, so the state of the art with this image is, this is as far as I needed to go to really show the referees that I did want to talk about the artistic potential of these shapes, and I felt like I had a lot to say about them. So it was a very helpful referee comment for me to feel free to go ahead and talk about that. And I think, you know, we all bring our insecurities to papers that we write, and mine was, is this good enough mathematically? So I was really encouraged by the invitation to add artistic content. But while this was going, I made a few realizations. Is that I realized the bands can twist. And then this creates a whole new kind of object that could be a sculpture. This one is colored just with wood grain, and the very busy colored pattern in the previous one, the 10-band icosahedron, I think that for some purposes that's too busy, so I retreated to the land of wood patterns that have these fine gradation, and then I did sort of go to town with reflection, you know, making them highly reflective and shining lights on them, and that part of the process was done in Photoshop. So here's an icosahedron getting a similar treatment. I believe this is a 10-band icosahedron, and you can see, like in this piece here, yeah, those bands do just slightly run into each other, but I figured, okay, so what? They're fine. So that was, I just got a lot of joy out of making these things twist. The tetrahedron, you have to see that one twice. This is it's the same as the Borromean rings, but as each, like for Borromean rings, you had 3 bands and they twist as you go. And it's a full twist as you go around. And I went, while someone else was talking, I put this in. This is the one that I put in the survey for people who filled out the survey. When there's a full twist in the bands, they don't have one side, they have 2 sides. And so you can have different colors on each side. So this really is just a thing of, I believe this one has 4 tetrahedral, 4 bands. Each would have 3-fold rotational symmetry, and they're colored differently on each side. So, and then one more thing is, one of the referees said, oh, well, you might mention the wide weave CPAC Takra. Oops, damn you, autocorrect. It's supposed to be CPAC Takra, where this now, it's like the CPAC Takraw has 6 bands, each with 5-fold rotational symmetry. All this does is take those 6 bands and separate each one into thirds. And here the center has sort of one symmetry, and the outer 2 are sort of off by probably a 36-degree rotation. So then these plate in a very pleasing way. I haven't checked exactly whether this is the same as the one that exists in reality, but it's I don't know. This is my sort of virtual imitation of that. I wanted to
on that one,
say again,
Frank.
Go ahead.
On that one, maybe with a slightly looser structure.
Yes.
You could see the triple bands as basically braids, and then you could have the braids when they cross one another have maybe a strict over-under pattern, like you get in some of the thongs that you have in your on your Chinese chairs or something like that.
Yes.
So I think the different kind of interweaving between these braids gives you a whole nother portfolio of potentially different sculptures out of the same basic principle.
Yeah, that's a beautiful idea. And I do know how to implement it, because for the center one, I think that one has to have dihedral symmetry, but then the left-hand one here all it needs is 5-fold symmetry, and it really could cross this other one here. And then to make this one, all you do is create a rotational image of that one. So one that is dihedrally symmetric, one here that can sort of be anything you want as long as it's 5-fold symmetry, and then a rotationally symmetric copy of it over on the other side. So yeah, trying to make those braid. Although I think that the central one might have to stay in place, so it wouldn't be what I think of as a 3-fold braid, but a one thing with other things crossing over it, sure. I wanted to say about a piece of future work at the place I was staying. This was a new quilt on the bed, or a new throw, you would say. And one morning I looked at that, and I looked at that and I thought, oh, I could make that. So yeah, that occupied me for a happy afternoon. And this is the first one that I got on the screen. And it's so striking here that these threads seem to be making a diagonal motion, but if you look closely at the edge here, they are really just going back and forth, and there's an illusion here that the thread is taking a diagonal path. So this was like the first idea I got on the just on the screen to get something that had the 4-fold rotational symmetry and something that might sort of work, and then I corrected it to this one. But so this is a little extra exercise in visual acuity. What's wrong with this? With this one, it's not quite a match, and it has to do with, see these little kinks here? I had them just going the wrong way, and so this is the corrected version. So I figure that'll make a nice little paper to write about this and other patterns to make plaited, I should say. I don't know, maybe this is weaving. Wallpaper patterns from these virtual bands. So I want to wind down by saying just a little bit about the place where I did this work. In the past, I've not shared interiors of our family cabin, but this was lost in the creek fire, many of you know. So this place burned down just shortly after Labor Day, and we're very sad, but we are also feeling just extraordinarily grateful to have had this place. My dad built that fireplace in 1947. I went there the summer before I was born, and this is, the heart of my family. And so I'll show you 2 more pictures. That's this porch, eating my oatmeal there every morning to get ready for a day, some days hiking, some days doing math. And then this is from another view to show you that, yeah, we really did our work to thin the forest near where we were, and that's not the totality of the answer, because a complete fire tornado passed through this area, and nothing we could have done to prepare the forest would have withstood that kind of fire. So here's my art therapy, is to create a vision of these things landing on the lake at night. This photograph of the stars up there that I had made several years ago.
Must be Area 51 in Nevada or something with the aliens coming.
That's where they're coming from. They got burned out of there and came to our lake. No, but you'll recognize, you know, some of the same shapes that I showed you, just, you know, coming in for a landing here. So the last thing I want to say is that I was asked sort of in the late winter, early spring by Erica Flappen to write something about mathematical art for the notices. I know that she thought of me because I was the one who submitted the Mathematical Makers Manifesto from the people who had visited ICERM, the semester visitors to ICERM, to, you know, just to call for more respect to people who produce mathematical communications, specifically visualizations, or, you know, we called ourselves mathematical makers. So maybe people who make physical objects. So I was asked to write about mathematical art. So I've got a manuscript nearly done, and I want to, maybe I'll change this to mathematical art and this present moment, because I think that in light of all that's happened, there's a lot that mathematical art can offer to the mathematical community during these extraordinary times. So I thought I'd share with you my first paragraph.
Bravo.
So why should we not say that that the things we do are art? You know, what I want is for our community to represent a great diversity of all the different kinds of people who contribute to this enterprise. And I want to feel free to call all of, you know, for everyone to call themselves mathematicians, because I think that this will do a lot to counter the idea that, gee, a mathematician has to be a person with a PhD in mathematics. No, a mathematician is a person who wants to get involved in the mathematical enterprise. I think it's as simple as that. So I want to share with you one more thing. And this is something where the timing was just exactly perfect, that this 3D print arrived in the mail today. So this is the tetrahedron from 3 bands with a full twist in each band. And it, you know, so it's Borromean rings. And let me zoom in here. It's the steel with golden plating. It's supposedly polished, but the polish is not very polishy, it seems to me. But I just feel so grateful. And, you know, people who know me know that I'm kind of a Platonist. So I feel like, you know, this thing sort of came into my life. And so I'm enjoying it. And I'm enjoying the thoughts that, you know, no matter how much I might feel like I'm done with a particular inquiry, it's going to open me up and lead me to additional inquiries as well.
Frank, can you say why you call this a tetrahedron? I mean, it's a
Well,
Borromean
it has
ring.
tetrahedral symmetry, sorry. It's an object with tetrahedral symmetry.
No, it doesn't have. No, I think it has
tetrahedral symmetry.
It has the symmetry of the double tetrahedron, right? It's really 2 tetrahedra of opposite chirality interlocking with one another, which you get from the twisted
that
Borromean.
group with 12 things in it that is commonly referred to as the rotational tetrahedral group.
Then it would have to have, you know, 4 distinct sort of corners around which you have threefold symmetry, and I don't see that. Maybe you have to rotate your jewel a little bit. So,
sure.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's very intriguing, but I can't see the tetrahedral form of it yet.
My fingers are on those 4 places.
Yeah, the vertices aren't the things that are sticking out.
See, these are 2 centers.
I see.
And
all right.
This is one kind of 3 center, and this is a different kind of 3 center.
Okay.
Yeah, and there really are 4 of each of those kinds of things. So they're like, these could be considered the face centers, or these could be considered the face centers, or these could be considered the vertices. But yeah, the group, and it's made based on making one of these things, like this one thing has, that I'm holding on to, that's 1 twisted band.
Right.
And it has a symmetry group with 4 things. And then I've made 3 copies of that, or, you know, this and 2
Mhm.
other copies, and rotated them correctly. And that is enough to generate that tetrahedral group, the chiral tetrahedral group.
Thank you. That's
Yeah.
really very, very intriguing, because
Yeah,
with the straight Borromean rings, you basically have a higher degree of symmetry. But by introducing the twist, what takes the straight Borromean ring, which is the dual tetrahedron, it breaks it down into a single tetrahedron. And now that you point out the faces or vertices, I can see how this works. This is great. I love it.
The thing that is so rich here is that, you know, I'll stop. Well, I'm not a polyhedral person. You know, I come from analysis and continuous geometry, and to have this, and so, you know, in a lot of situations, I don't know what I'm doing, but I do know that if you start with a group in mind and a subgroup, any subgroup, you can make a thing invariant under that subgroup, and then use coset representatives to copy it out. And that's what the paper is. Okay, that's probably more time than I was supposed to take, but it was fun. Thank you.
I had one more question too, though. On your pictures, it looks almost like, is Rhino doing like physical modeling for you? It looks like some of the bands and the weaves are under tension, and I'm just kind of curious how you did that.
No, that's really an illusion of what's going on. I really would love to work with somebody who's better at kangaroo than I am, because I know that if you put these in kangaroo, there is a way to sort of tighten them up and have them sort of pretend to obey physical laws. My experiments to do that have failed so far. So I'd be happy to work with someone, but it's, I think it's part of my aesthetic as I tune those parameters to look for something that sort of cozies up and looks like it's, oh yes, that's sort of nicely touching that other one there. Good question. And Susan asked the question, I believe that I made, I think you can find these on Shapeways if you want to have it.
I was hoping that would be true.
Oh. Frank, one question about the tetrahedral shape. It looked like the ribbons were maybe almost, I don't know what the, you know, tangential with, you know, in a way that you would have continuity if you had the right line going across. Is that just, is it close, or did you actually go for that?
No, I was just sort of tuning a shape and looking at the shape and then thinking, oh, that's really close. That's really pretty the way they just sort of get in there and are just touch. So they cozy up to each other. So that was, you know, it was a design choice that happened by moving sliders and investigating the outcome of those sliders. So it's
If it
not.
didn't touch, it would be loose, right? If they didn't touch, would it be loose?
Yeah.
Three rings, yeah.
Yeah, so you could just make the bands smaller and they'd be 3 rings that would fall apart. Shapeways tends not to want to print things that are like that.